My ex-girlfriend and I, 27 and 28 years old respectively, shared a common life for 5 years. As far as I was concerned, everything worked out perfectly. We were the epitome of a couple in love. Our lives were like a garden full of roses and flowers. We were united by common interests, hobbies, and even character traits. Throughout our time together, we avoided disagreements and arguments. Friends assured me that she was my other half. Not once over the years did I notice anything disturbing in her behavior. We were always on the same page, so the news of her infidelity, which I learned through the security cameras in our home, struck me to the core. I was shocked and speechless. After all, everything was going great in our relationship as far as I was concerned. We enjoyed each other romantic dates, gave gifts, and made cute surprises, making our life together happy and full. However, the infidelity caught me completely unexpectedly. The next day, coming back from work, I found that all her things were gone. Not realizing what was happening, I received a message from her that shed light on the whole situation. She admitted to a love triangle from the moment we met, wavering between me and her ex. Eventually, after realizing that her feelings for her ex were stronger, she chose him. The message was written with obvious coldness and indifference, which further increased my feelings of resentment and anger. I made the decision not to seek contact with her, but shared the story with friends and family. Just a week after the breakup, I learned that she and her new partner had been involved in a drunk driving accident that was fatal. Her family was unaware of her double life until the last minute. After the accident, my ex's family approached me to inform me of what had happened. In response, I expressed indifference to my ex's plight, explaining that the betrayal had made me lose any feelings for her. Their surprise was due to the lack of a complete picture of the situation on their part, as it was never made explicit by telling me. To clarify the circumstances, I shared with them a message I had received from her recently, which made them apologize and acknowledge my justifiable grievances. My family and friends also expressed their support for me, but I reiterated that my feelings for my ex were in the past, and I only hoped she would find what she was looking for, even if it was with her ex. My lack of emotion in their eyes seemed to be a sign of coldness and indifference, which led to criticism of me. However, my indifference was tempered by the sense of betrayal experienced during the 5 years wasted in a relationship with someone who wasn't sincere with me. I was indifferent to the opinions of others about my behavior, for nothing could change the deep wound of betrayal left by the lies that enveloped our relationship. So my detachment and lack of desire to discuss what happened with my ex, with anyone, was my way of dealing with the disappointment and starting to move forward. A betrayal of this magnitude leaves no room for sympathy. Your feelings in this context are absolutely justified. You are not being foolish when faced with something like this. However, be prepared for the fact that grief may visit you. Emotions are unpredictable, and you may feel an increase in anger after a few months. In the moment, anger may be muting your other feelings, but grief is likely to come. It may feel like there hasn't been enough time for the grieving process and realizing the end of the relationship, let alone accepting her death. Self-care becomes a priority in such a difficult situation. It is normal to react to unusual circumstances in unusual ways. It's understandable why you feel anger. The best years of your life have been overshadowed by betrayal. There is no one-size-fits-all way to respond to life-changing events, especially when they happen so quickly. Whatever you decide to do, don't be surprised if you experience ups and downs comparable to a roller coaster. And don't be surprised if you don't get criticized, because your reaction to circumstances is understandable. This is when you need support. It's important not to let anger overwhelm you. Considering discussing what is happening with a professional can be a healthy step. Don't let this situation undermine your self-esteem. You deserve a better future where the betrayal is just a distant memory. Next story. I am 25 years old, as is my husband. We are looking forward to having a baby. Now I am faced with the task of choosing a name for a future family member, and I hope for the support of my loved ones. My family has a unique situation. My siblings and I have different moms. I grew up under the care of my parents. My mom's name was the same as mine. Her choice of my name was unconventional. It reflected nature and was not as common as, for example, Lily or Rose. My parents did not find common ground on the issue of my name. My mother insisted on her option, and my father chose my middle name for me. Unfortunately, their marriage was far from perfect. My mom passed away when I was only 5 years old. Sometime after her death, my father met my stepmother Jane. When they started living together, they suggested I take my middle name as my primary name. I declined, preferring the name given by my mother, which upset my father a bit. However, that moment was quickly forgotten. My father and Jane were much more similar in their tastes, which was reflected in the choice of names for my younger siblings: Elizabeth, James, Hannah, Michael. My name raised questions, but I was always proud of its origin, explaining to people that it was my mom's choice. This was not easy for Jane to accept, and my new family didn't like my name very much. I have always had a deep love for my family, but my pride in the name my mom gave me prevailed. Being different from others never seemed to be a problem for me. Wanting to fit in or fit in better with the family was not my goal. This connection to my mom was always a source of pride for me when I was young. I often reasoned about continuing to connect with nature and other aspects of life that were close to me. Difficulties arose when I announced to my family that I was pregnant. They wondered if we would continue the tradition of unusual name choices. We decided not to reveal the name until the baby was born and asked them to refrain from suggesting it. However, this only brought more attention to our choice. The family expressed that we should consider their preferences. The father suggested that we think about keeping the baby's name from standing out. The siblings were interested in Jane's opinion, emphasizing how important it was to consider her feelings, given that she had been involved in my upbringing for many years. I made my position clear, pointing out that they had no say in choosing a name for my child. I emphasized that I do not wish my child's name to blend in. My beliefs and preferences should not be questioned based on their opinions or suggestions. This was perceived as ignoring their feelings and not wanting to consider their point of view. My family argued that I was sending the wrong message by starting this discussion years ago and expressing my desire to follow my mom's example. They felt that my decision to be independent in my choice of name was disrespectful of their feelings and perceptions. Your father and stepmother already had the opportunity to choose names for their children. They are not entitled to another opportunity to do so, given that they have already passed that stage. Your attachment to the name given by your mom is perceived by them as disrespectful to your stepmother, which seems absurd. I understand that in blended families such feelings can arise, but your connection to the memory of your mom and your right to maintain it or not belongs solely to you. It's hard for me to understand when choosing a name for a child has become a communal affair. Honestly, your family was being weird by assuming they could be wrong in any context, especially when considering the idea of forcing a 5-year-old to change his name as if you were nothing more than a renamed puppy. I'd recommend you cut down on your interactions with them given their behavior. Now I want to tell a different story. In my 29-year journey of life, I have faced quite a few challenges, especially as a child going through my parents' divorce. When I was 10 years old, my parents made the decision to separate, which changed my life dramatically. Since then, they put me at the epicenter of their relationship, tasked with making the difficult choice of where to live. At the age of 10, I chose to live with my dad after my mom decided to move out. My parents stopped communicating with each other, as far as I was concerned, due to constant arguments and conflicts. This made me feel torn between them, constantly having to choose sides. The situation worsened to the point that by the time I turned 14, I had completely lost touch with my mom. By the time I was 17, however, I tried to rekindle our relationship, though not without further disagreements, which we experienced when I was in my 20s. Despite this, by the time I was 25 to 26, we were able to fully mend our relationship. My father has always been a model of stability and reliability. Despite the natural disagreements that arose between us, he always supported me. Over the years, he stopped speaking negatively about my mother and even encouraged me to keep in touch with her. Now my father lives 3 hours flight away from me, and we see each other infrequently, about once a year. I realize that I should make more of an effort to maintain our communication. My mom lives nearby, only an hour away, which makes it possible for us to see each other about once a month. This month, my brother Evan is getting married. The wedding is only 30 minutes away from me. Despite his issues with my mom, he has invited her to the wedding in an effort to avoid any conflict. Dad is also invited to the celebration. This will be their first meeting in almost 2 decades. Both of them had studiously avoided such meetings previously, even skipping my 21st birthday for fear of possible conflict. When I received the invitation to the wedding, I immediately called my father and suggested that he stay at my place. This worried me, as meetings with him are rare. I wanted him to see my new place, meet my dog, and spend time with my boyfriend. My mom was also invited to stay with me during the wedding and bring 2 friends with her, planning a weekend getaway. My father had the option of choosing an alternative place to stay, however. Given our infrequent communication, I suggested he stay with me. Noting his moderate attitude toward alcohol, which sets him apart from other members of our family, my father expressed reluctance to stay in the accommodation provided for guests due to concerns about drinking and defiant behavior. Compounding the complexity of the situation is the fact that my mother is also unsuitable for this accommodation due to past disagreements with my father's family following the divorce. I contemplated asking my mom to look for another place to live to make room for my dad. He insisted that I explain to my mom the need to look for alternative housing. To date, I had not raised the issue with mom without notifying her of dad's desire to stay or his invitation. Faced with the need to discuss this, I once again felt like an insecure 10-year-old unable to express my feelings and needs. My boyfriend offered to take over the conversation with my mom and handle the housing issue for her and her friends. However, realizing that I was almost 30 years old, I came to the conclusion that I had to handle this on my own and tell my mom to look for another place to live. Feelings of guilt and frustration overwhelm me at the thought of the impending conversation. My brother has expressed his willingness to decline my mom's invitation to the wedding, which could have ended this predicament. He is prone to emotional reactions, but his desire to care for my feelings remains unchanged. Despite this, my brother feels that his focus should be on his own wedding. I wonder if my decision would be a sign of irrationality if I asked my mom to look for alternative accommodations. You decided to invite your dad over for a visit. At the same time, your mom has independently decided to join you. With great regret, you turn to her. "I apologize, Mom, but unfortunately, I will not have room for you and your friends. It has already been decided by me to invite another guest. It will be necessary to find an alternative place to stay. It's important to stand your ground by protecting your own boundaries and relationship with your father. Skipping moments of meeting with your father because of a desire to avoid conflict is not worth it. This is the time to take responsibility, maturity, and determination." A guy's offer of help shows up. If it is difficult to do it on your own, don't refuse support. If the boyfriend is unable to help, let him do as he sees fit. Inappropriate offers from your mom to move in with other people should be met with understanding, without giving in to provocation. Now that you are still recovering from the emotional and psychological pressures you have experienced, it is important to give yourself time. Remember past trials and hardships from your childhood. Accepting help and seeking professional support will be the right thing to do. You may be able to deal with such issues on your own in the future without fear or doubt, but now is the time to take care of yourself and your well-being. My next story. I, a 34-year-old woman, decided to call my cousin's husband, a 35-year-old man, because of his rudeness and unauthorized ordering at a family dinner. The situation caused a division of opinion in my family, which consists of Canadians of Chinese descent. My uncle and his spouse, Aaron and Gloria, who live in China and had not visited us in 4 years, decided to organize a splendid Chinese banquet. In honor of their visit and first meeting their young son, a lavish dinner was prepared at a Michelin-starred restaurant for 16 guests. The menu included 11 pre-ordered dishes. My cousin Monica brought her fiancé Todd without prior notice, increasing the number of guests to 17. Despite this small misunderstanding, the restaurant adapted to the change with ease, providing enough food for 20 people. The menu included, among other things, 4 savory ducks, the portions of which were so generous that each guest would have had enough for 5 to 7 wraps. Another duck was later served to our table, causing my aunt's bewilderment. Todd at this time entered the conversation and ordered an additional savory duck for $280, despite the fact that he wasn't going to try the other entrees and preferred to enjoy just the duck. We were all taken aback by his action, but decided not to discuss it for the rest of the dinner. My uncle was clearly upset by Todd's behavior and not consulting with anyone before ordering. Gloria paid for the dinner, which apparently cost about $9,000 after adding wine tax and tip, according to the restaurant's website. Todd did not offer to pay for his extra duck and was already out for a smoke when we discussed the matter with Monica's parents and Todd himself. I shared my observations about how Todd lost his temper and acted rudely, which I felt was a clear sign of disrespect. It seemed to me that our hosts, who had generously invited us to a Michelin-starred restaurant, had been wronged. Todd objected, arguing that if our family was capable of organizing such a dinner, a few extra courses shouldn't be a problem financially. I tried to explain that the argument wasn't about money, but about manners and respect, which Todd had shown without showing the slightest acknowledgement of his impoliteness or inappropriate behavior. Monica stated that she was willing to cover the cost of the order, but my argument was not focused on the financial side of the issue, but on the need for Todd to admit his mistake and apologize. Todd, on his part, argued that he saw nothing wrong with his actions and didn't think it was necessary to look into the situation further. In response to my words, it was suggested that Gloria, being Chinese and more culturally connected, was experiencing the situation more acutely than is common in Canada and that her reaction was due to an oversensitivity and adherence to tradition. As a result, it was pointed out to me that it was allegedly unreasonable for me to call to clarify the circumstances. Todd is Chinese, as is Erin, my mother, and Monica's mother are all related. Monica began to distance herself from our family several years ago when she made the decision to move to the United States for higher education. After her studies, she settled in New York and did not visit home for 10 years. Her return to the family circle came only a few months ago when her parents stopped their financial support. As she prepares to get married, she is eager to reconnect with her family, counting on her parents to cover the cost of organizing a lavish wedding. I ended up being one of the bridesmaids, although the choice was not made by me, but influenced by my mother and Monica's mother. Over time, Monica's parents stopped supporting her financially, which forced her to look for other ways to get advantages, including going to expensive places where she didn't have to pay the bill. She decided to invite her future spouse to a family dinner, knowing the family's wealth and assuming that the expense would not be an issue. The behavior of Monica and her fiancé seemed to come from a desire to capitalize on the situation without investing their own resources. In case you are unable to attend the wedding in person, sending a Michelin-star cookbook as a wedding gift can be an exquisite gesture. Not only will it emphasize your thoughtfulness, but it will offer the bride inspiration for future culinary masterpieces. It is important to remember that using other people's money without consent is unacceptable in any society. Caution should be your priority, especially when it comes to other people's financial obligations. The case of Monica allegedly asking guests to cover the huge expenses of her gala sounds as a warning to everyone. When you talk about the situation with Todd, who found himself excluded from family events due to inappropriate behavior, you can see the importance of boundaries and respect in family and friendships, especially since the bill of $9,000 for a dinner for 17 people seems exorbitant and comparable to the price of a used car, which raises questions about values and priorities.